the verified system that Valve has for the Steam Deck, and then moving forward to Steam OS and Steam Machine, and I'm sure that they'll do something similar to Steam Frame. A lot of people are not super happy about that. Well, yesterday, apparently, we got a Steam Deck beta client update. Valve released a Steam Deck beta client update, adding hardware specs attachment option for Steam user reviews. So when somebody leaves a review, we'll know what kind of hardware that they were using, which is really nice because that'll tell you, oh, well, they got the same computer as me and my system is running like garbage, or would run this system like garbage. So awesome, I can avoid that game. But then they also said that it's anonymized. They're also going to have anonymized frame rate data collection in order to help with game compatibility. Now, this is an opt-in feature for SteamOS devices, and improve deck verified rating feedback with optional reason submission. The update also displays higher resolution capsule images and a bunch of other stuff that I'm not really interested in talking about. But the most important thing here, and the two questions that I have for you guys. Question number one, Valve, using this anonymized frame rate data that is uploaded when you are playing a game. Oh, you're running this game at 40 frames per second. You're running this game at 120 frames per second. This one's running at 20 frames per second. Could they combine that information with the settings that the game is running at and the hardware that the person is running on and get a really good picture for what this game would not only run like on, say, my hardware, but also what settings I should use in order to optimize for better frame rates? That's my first question. The second question is, what would you guys do to improve the deck verified, the SteamOS verified systems that we have right now? Rich, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I feel like with the sort of, can they use this to, basically improve what's there? One of the things that I think it's going to be difficult for them, and I'm curious to know, like, Carrie, what you would think, for example, is like, I feel like it would be difficult to infer the in-game settings. That's the part that I think is going to be challenging. I think they can still do a lot potentially with anonymized frame rate data, knowing sort of the specs that people are on. But I think the in-game settings is a big piece of that, and so I worry that they wouldn't be able to capture that. Still, though, I think that just having anonymized frame rate data, even if it was not used for kind of like this big picture improvement and optimization, even if it was just used as a, like, I need a list of games that I need to improve and I need it to be ordered, right? And so, like, if you see that, one particular game is just really bad in performance, maybe that's a game that, as a Proton developer, that you focus on a little bit more. You give a little bit more love to another game. So that may be a way that they're thinking of it. But in terms of improving the deck verified system, I actually don't have a lot here, even though I don't like the deck verified system. But the thing that I do have, Bill, I'm wondering what you think of it. So, because you're a school teacher, the way I want Valve to improve the deck verified system is actually extremely simple. I just want a transparent rubric. That's it. Because I feel like I don't know what Valve considers verified sometimes.
Mm-hmm. that's like,
yeah, that laugh said a lot.
That's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing, right? And so, like, if the baseline, which I know a lot of people have inferred by now, if the baseline is 30 FPS, then say that. But they don't say that because that's not what it is, or at least I can't imagine that's what it is.
They say a playable frame rate.
Right.
But they don't define what playable is.
Right. So I feel like you could put a rubric behind this, even if it isn't the same rubric for all games. Like, maybe action games need to be 40 FPS plus. And, point and click games can be as low as 20 FPS or something like that. Or turn-based games can be as low as 20 FPS. And then, like, the render resolution should be this much. If you had something transparent in terms of what means good performance, I think that would go a long way, because even people that don't like that rubric could just say, I can safely ignore this and go based on something else.
I think that's a great idea. And I also think that there's an added benefit that would also give developers a target. You know what I mean? Like, they would say, okay, well, you know what? We can try and nail this down so we can get that green check mark.
Yes.
But before I say anything else, Rich asked Carrie what he thought about something. I've forgotten already because it was a while ago.
Yeah, like in terms of inferring in-game settings, I know there are some things we can do but like, does that seem realistic as a thing for Valve to maybe do?
So one of the things that I do when I do my benchmarks on Steam Deck, Linux in general, I actually capture a lot of metadata in the background. And one of the things that I did or explored doing was automatically finding out what resolution a game was running at, because I started doing 720p and 1080p. And I was like, I don't want to write this down all the time. I would just rather the computer just jot it because it should know. And it turns out that's a hard problem to do. Like, GameScope really just like gets in the way a bunch and obfuscates what's going on. So trying to extract that data, insofar as like, maybe I'm not doing the best ways possible, but from that layer alone, even through GameScope and what other things that they can tie into it, it's going to be not the best. And then you're going to start getting into other bits of telemetry, which people may push back against. Like, they're like, say, hey, if we wanted telemetry, we would just go use Windows. And
Good point.
the other point is, like, API-wise, that is something that they'd have to tie into, which is a whole other thing. So I don't... It's hard to say outside of, like, where it is right now, trying to ascertain things from what you can get right now. There's a bunch that you can get right now, because like what version of Mesa they're running, what version of RADV they're running, what version, and I collect all this stuff, right? Because it's super simple to collect. But when you start really getting into it, like, I can know how much RAM is being used. I can know how much VRAM is being used. You can start peeling away at some of the easier data without really needing telemetry. So there is a number of things that you can do. How useful that would be, I don't know. You'd really have to start seeing like how much like reams of data you can get from everyone before you can start maybe getting some sort of picture from that, to like, okay, this thumbprint, right, of like whatever this is for your hardware, it looks like you'd be kind of okay. I don't know if that would need some exploration with what they have currently. So basically, this is answering Bill's both questions at the same time. Is what's there is I don't think is enough, and likely leads to telemetry, which people will push back on, or some type of API that could feed this data.
Russ, if they had the option for you to opt in to give that data, that telemetry that Carrie's talking about, to Valve in order to improve things overall for everybody, would you be okay with that on your particular system if it was opt-in?
Yeah, I mean, I think just collecting anonymous usage data, like what my frame rate is based on my settings, whatever, I'd be fine with that. What I think, though, the component they need for the Steam Deck Verified program in general is more of a community solution, community involvement. So the way I'm envisioning it is when you have your piece of hardware, and let's focus on Steam Deck and Steam Machine, right? You'll go into the settings and like there'll be like a toggle or something, and it'll be like, what is your hardware that you're using? Steam Deck, or they'll just know it, right? So it already knows that you're using that. And then what I see is kind of like controller profiles. There's all those Steam input profiles when you go in there, and there's like all these, and some are garbage, and like they get upvoted and downvoted and stuff, right? So I'd love to see something like that in terms of settings, and be like, okay, it already knows what hardware you've got because you've either put it in there or just figured it out. And then this is what people are doing and who's getting the most upvotes and stuff. That's what I like to see, like an overlay. Like, all right, I'm playing Spider-Man, push this button. Okay, people are saying 800p, 30 frames per second locked is great, but you can also use FSR or something. So like that's the top voted one. Let me try that one out. And I don't know if it could be to the point where you could click on it and then it applies your settings. I think that's probably a little too involved. But just having that to reference on the machine as I'm using it would be like super handy. Yeah. So that's kind of what I want to see with that. And then also in the same way for the verified system, a feedback loop to be like, no, this thing is not compatible, and have an ability to like provide a little bit more user submission. The most I've ever seen is like, hey, Steam Deck says this is verified. Do you agree? And that's like the most I've ever seen. I have no idea where that goes and whatever happens from that. But I'd like to have more feedback loop in there for that. That's basically all I would like to see.
That last part that you just said is in this new beta. It says, when submitting feedback on whether or not you agree with the deck verified rating, if you disagree, we will now ask for a reason, providing a reason is optional. So
yeah, that's a good
you're on the right track.
Look at that. They should hire me.
You're ready to run Valve.
If the verified system of asking people if it played or not was the reason why things are getting verified right now as it is,
That's honestly how I already feel, right? Like I feel like it's very much driven not initially by the community. Obviously, like Valve has sort of the first say so, but I think the reason that they have that survey in the first place is because they were getting so much backlash even from the beginning, and they use that input that the community gives to just say like, okay, if you think it's verified, I think it's verified. If you don't think it's verified, I don't think it's verified. But and I think, to be fair, I think that could be a fair way to do it. Maybe, again, with more transparency, right? Like because if no one knows better what the standards for, say, a fighting game should be than the fighting game community, right? So, like, maybe it does make sense to leave it in the hands of the community. But I think, again, transparency would go a long way to making that a lot clearer.
To piggyback right off what you were saying, Rich, they already have a system for creators and following creators on Steam, and it would be great if you could just be like, hey, this person that is in the fighting genre and he's really popular, he's saying that it is not good here. Like, okay, this one guy who should be an authority is saying yes or no. So instead of all of these people saying yes, that Monster Hunter runs perfectly, please let me not listen to those people. Let me just listen to Maximilian
dude.
Yeah, I just want one person, one yes or no from that person.
Man,
that makes a lot of sense.
I wish, the curator thing is one of those things that like Steam brought, and you could see that there was going to be a lot of potential there, or Valve did, and then they didn't really do anything with it. One of the things I was really hoping for with Steam curators was like, this could be the gateway towards like affiliates, right? Like affiliate sales. They never did that. And, that's not Valve's kind of mindset, but I think that would have been huge.
I think from their point of view that like it's a system that would then be gamed, and then they have to fight the people that are gaming the system.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it becomes this whole thing of like, well, who inside of our team is going to be the arbiter of doing this? And everyone was like, not me. And then it was like, all right, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Because, that's apparently how a Valve works. Is like, okay, who's going to be the vice president of it's your effing problem now? And
yeah,
and
they love that.
People either raise their hand or they don't. And I agree with you ultimately, Rich. I think that the curator system did need that. There needs to be some mechanism there. And like Epic did that, where they had the support a creator code thing where you can get that. And I don't think that particular system has been, well, I mean, the platform isn't as popular as Steam, but I don't think that was gamed as much.
Same for Humble. I don't think the Humble system is so much gamed. I think, a lot of people, admittedly myself and Bill and Russ included, when we post links to Humble Bundle, it's because we think they're good bundles, right? Like we think they're good deals.
Yeah.
There's a link right down below that you guys can get right now.
So I think the thing about Humble Bundle is like, generally speaking, you're like, here's 8 games for $12. Like,
right.
It's like it's not a big thing versus like, here's this game for $60. I'm saying it's awesome, and I'm going to get 10% of that. And it's like, there's different things. I think that I don't know. I think it's a bit different.
I mean, this is clearly, we've gone off topic, but this is super interesting to me. I think the fact that you also have Steam ratings kind of gets rid of the problems that you're talking about, Carrie, because let's say that you're an affiliate or what's it called? A curator, right?
Curator.
Yeah, you're a Steam curator. And you're like, I think this game is great. And then I click on that game and the reviews are
overwhelmingly
terrible.
Negative.
I'm like, okay, well, clearly he doesn't know what he's talking about. Or maybe he and I would agree on this and everybody else is wrong. Like, video games are subjective things.
Sure.
They all hit us all differently. And so when I play a game, I'm like, this thing is the greatest thing ever. And Russ plays it and he's like, Bill, never recommend a game to me again, because Russ and I just don't like the same kind of games. So let's just something else.
Ultimately, I think the system works 95% of the time. It's just that 5% of the people that are abusing it that are really going to take the whole thing down in certain ways. I still think your point is super valid, Bill. Like the overwhelmingly negative, and people just like, well, wait a minute, hang on here. But yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. I do wish that it was more, but it kind of just fizzled.
Yep. Maybe they'll come back to it one day.
Maybe. Same with like Steam Broadcast. Like, they have a lot of projects where they had ideas and they just left them to die on the vine for no particular reason, I guess. Or maybe they just decided it wasn't worth the cost. But whatever. that's beside the point. But back to the topic at hand, those of you who are watching this, let us know what you guys think. Could Valve, what would you do to improve the deck verified system, the SteamOS verified system? Let us know in the comments section down below.